be clear in how I characterize this. This is mostly a protest. It is not, generally speaking, unruly.
Peaceful protest.
Peaceful protesters.
Peaceful protest.
Peaceful protest.
Peaceful protest.
Peaceful protest. Peaceful protest.
Peaceful protest.
Peaceful protest. Peaceful protest.
Good evening. I'm Robert Cressionnie. Thanks for tuning in to America in Danger. And tonight my co-host is John Gatsis, a good friend of mine. And John, like me, is just an ordinary citizen. But the difference is that John, like me, has been aware of what's going on in this country for many years. And we have paid attention to it for many years. John, before we ever met, was looking at these things, as was I. And together we look at these things and we see some pretty scary things out there. So John,
Indeed.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. First of all, I'd like to say that I'm grateful that you've resurrected the show. You know, it was a show that was quite fine in the past when you did it.
Well, thank you.
I enjoyed the limited participation I had in those days. Mm-hmm. And I don't think people realize what it takes to commit to something like this.
It's a commitment.
It is a commitment. And I think that's part of the problem our side of things has, is that most of us are actually doing things.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to really get out there and get involved in these issues and really press our side.
It is.
The other side has a whole army of people who aren't doing anything.
You've got that right. You know, when you work, John is a businessman like me, and when you work and produce, you don't have a lot of time for going out and protesting and rioting and hanging out on the streets.
That's correct.
So
that's right.
Just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, I mean, I've got no time for rioting.
Nor do I.
Yeah.
This week marked, in fact, April 19th of this week marked the anniversary of the shot heard around the world. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but I want to go through a little bit of that because I think that there's a lot that went on then in the American War for Independence that we need to rekindle today.
A lot of parallels.
And there were a lot of principles that the colonialists operated under that our society has long forgotten or ignored or become complacent and just doesn't see the importance thereof. So I've got a little thing I want to run through, and there's a little video in it, and I think the video is very impactful. So I want to start with this. In 1775, colonial America, tensions had been rising for years prior to the skirmish that took place just north of Boston in what became known as the Battle of Lexington and Concord. King George III, the British king, viewed the colonies as a source of revenue to fund British expansionism. Now, with each new tax or regulation, resentment and resistance grew among the colonists. 5 years prior to that, in 1770, an angry mob of colonists attacked a British patrol. Shots were fired, 5 colonists were killed and 6 wounded. This incident would become known as the Boston Massacre, even though it wasn't really an unprovoked attack. But if we flash forward back to 1775 again, tensions in the colonies were at a boiling point. Patrick Henry gave his famous "Give me liberty or give me death" speech, which I would love to hear a politician saying that today, but we have few politicians of the caliber of the founders of this nation.
That's correct.
But Patrick Henry gave that speech, and the British military, sensing that there was revolution in the air, so to speak, they set about, under orders from the king, to quell any potential for an uprising. They sought out to destroy colonial weapons, and arrest anyone who dared to speak against the crown. So, Lee, if you'll run that video, take a look at this, and we'll be right back.
The colonial soldiers are about to meet their first test. In a field outside Lexington, 77 militiamen have gathered to block the redcoat advance towards Concord. John Parker, leader of the Minutemen, knows the British outnumber his forces 10-1. He doesn't expect to defeat them. He just wants to send a message. We're here, we have guns, and we're going to resist. Major John Pitcairn, who commands the British troops, doesn't want to fight in Lexington. Running behind schedule, his goal is to secure a bridge farther west in Concord, but Pitcairn is forced to respond to the Minutemen's blockade.
Lay down your arms. Hold! Do not fire!
Neither side wanted a war to start. And so they stand there sort of face to face for a while.
Hundreds of professional soldiers confront dozens of militiamen armed with squirrel rifles and buckshot. Both Parker and Pitcairn issue orders not to shoot.
And somebody fired. And to this day, nobody knows exactly who fired. Was it a British soldier? Was it an American soldier? Was it a bystander? Who knows?
The shot triggers a hail of British bullets. The militiamen are overwhelmed and quickly retreat, some racing into the nearby woods. In 15 minutes, the Redcoats have routed the colonists. When the smoke clears, 8 patriots lay dead, and the British soldiers continue on their way to Concord.
All right, well, the British proceeded on to Concord, and they quickly secured the bridges, the north and south bridges, and they went on to conduct a search for arms and ammunition because they'd been told that's where the colonials were, storing their arms and ammunition. Search was unsuccessful, and more militia continued to arrive throughout the morning. With colonial forces growing, the British began a tactical retreat back to Charleston. They were rescued part of the way back by another detachment led by British Lieutenant General Hugh Percy. Now, the opening battle of the American Revolution at Lexington and Concord ended with 73 British and 49 colonials dead. The next day, Commander Perry would remark that we were fired upon from all corners, but particularly from the houses on the roadside and the adjacent stone walls. Percy went on to say, whoever looks upon them as an irregular mob will find himself very much mistaken. They have men amongst them who know very well what they're about. For my part, I never imagined they would have attacked the king's troops or have had the perseverance I found in them yesterday. Now, the American War for Independence officially ended on September 3rd, 1783, with the signing of the Paris Peace Treaty, formally ending British rule over the American colonies. So, very interesting times back then, very interesting men who orchestrated the break from Britain.
Yeah, and the commitment was huge.
It was huge. These people knew that if they failed, their lives were gone. they would all be hung.
Well, in fact, the common phrase was, when you hear it in historical accounts today, they pledge their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor.
Absolutely.
And you alluded earlier to the current day politicians, and one of the reasons I have so much, I'm going to say contempt, for the politicians today, even those who purport to be on our side, is that I don't see any evidence that any one of those men up there in Washington would commit to that level of sacrifice.
I agree.
And in fact, I think most of them are probably in some way, to a certain extent, on the grift, for all intent and purpose. And so, I'm not saying that that I expect anybody to lay down their life, on my behalf, but I don't revere these people in any way, shape, or form.
I agree.
Unlike the founders.
I agree.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that. In fact, I have to say that until a politician proves otherwise,
guilty until proven innocent.
Guilty
No,
until
I'm sorry.
proven
I'm at
innocent in
that.
this case.
I'm at that point. I really am.
Yeah.
Yeah. They are a continual disappointment. They continually let down, and they never really abide by the things they say they're going to do. At least none of the ones on our side seem to.
That's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. One of the things that precipitated the entire war for independence was the fact that the British looked upon their subjects in the colonies as a source of revenue.
Right.
They taxed, they stole, they seized, and that's really not unlike what we have today.
Absolutely.
In fact, right now, the Democrats in Congress are talking about passing the largest tax increase in the history of the world.
Yeah.
In the history of the world.
Right.
And it's just, I'm just flabbergasted that people out there really think somehow that is a benefit to this nation.
Yeah, I don't think that they do. I don't really think that they necessarily believe that. I just think that as long as people have their basic needs met, their basic comfort levels are satisfied, they got the phones to play with, they've got food, they've got a certain amount of entertainment and creature comforts. And I think what the architects of a lot of this stuff that we find so objectionable are counting on is that very fact.
I think so.
I think they, a lot of the dystopian science fiction movies of the past sort of projected these futures where the statists and the authoritarians finally came up with a way to supply everybody's basic needs.
Right.
And I think they feel like they're on the precipice of being able to do that and engineer a society in a world where most people get the minimum they need to be happy, and then they can extract all the worker bee energy that these people have to provide toward their ends and to their concept of the greater good and the greater world.
I would have to agree, and with the proverbial frog in water ramping up the temperature.
Slowly, that's
people
right.
have simply accepted all of these things and come to expect these things in many cases.
Now, I will assert that they're wrong about that. I mean, people, I think, ultimately yearn for freedom, and I think that never works, and I think it always ends up in gulags and large body counts and totalitarianism and all the things that we've seen throughout history when this type of societal engineering has been attempted.
I think so, because what we see in this country, they try to make it out with the controlled media. They try to make it out that there's a large majority of people in this country who support those things.
Right.
And the reality is this: it's not a large majority.
Right. It's not.
You've got those who are simply complacent and ignorant of everything going on.
Which probably, frankly, constitutes the most people.
The most people. And there's a small minority.
And I don't say that in a pejorative way. I mean, right. I mean, most people are living their lives. They don't want to have to do all that. They want to live. They want to live. They want to be left alone.
Yeah.
And they want their liberty respected.
Yeah.
And heretofore, up until 5 minutes ago, it was pretty much.
Yeah. And that's a good point, because that's one of the major differences between the liberals and the conservatives. Conservatives go about working, building wealth, providing, producing. They don't want to dictate how people live and what they do in their everyday lives. And on the other side of the fence, the liberals, they think nothing more than dictating to individuals.
Well, they believe in the perfectibility of man through man, and they see themselves as the agents of that perfection.
Exactly.
So it's a very sort of narcissistic delusion of grandeur, actually, that they have in many cases.
You're absolutely right. Now, I would like to point out one thing in the beginning of that video. The commander of that ragtag little bunch of colonialists said he had a message to send to the British, that we have guns and we're going to resist.
Right.
you know, that whole sentiment right there led to the Second Amendment.
I was going to say, do you think that might have informed their thinking about the Second Amendment when they drafted the Constitution?
So.
Maybe, I think
believe
maybe.
it did.
Yeah, it could be.
I think people back then understood that the guns are not there, and even that little squad of colonial Americans, they knew that they couldn't stand toe-to-toe with the British.
Right.
But it didn't take standing toe-to-toe.
It does not.
The message was, we're here, we don't like what's going on, we're armed, and we're going to resist.
Going to push back a little bit.
Going to push back, and it's time for our side to push back a little bit.
And you know, no matter how overwhelming a force, nobody wants to step into an environment where they might get shot nonetheless.
Well, that's right.
You know, it's a lot easier for people to, you know, bust indoors and shoot at people when they know there's no possibility of anybody shooting back.
That's right. Gun-free zones are the most dangerous zone you can step into.
That's right.
The most dangerous zone you can step into. And, you know, the General Percy said they were shooting at us from every house and behind every tree and every rock. And, and that's another thing that is the deterrence value of a heavily armed society. It's not that we're going to go out there and fight the military in the street. Nobody wants to do that. That's unwinnable. That's untenable. But the fact is, nobody wants a situation like Somalia.
Right.
Where there's a gun sticking out of every window.
That's right.
And with that, we're going to take a little break. I'm Robert Cressionnie. My co-host John Gatsis. We'll be back for more America in Danger right after this. Stay tuned.
It's our once-a-year incredible warehouse sale.
And you can't miss it.
From traditional to modern, we have the best home furnishings at 60 to 90% off. Thousands of lamps, decorative accessories, and chandeliers. An incredible selection of designer furniture, all conveniently located off I-95. Transform your home this year and save big.
You know where to find us. 218 North Church Street, downtown Rocky Mount.
We're back. I'm Robert Cressionnie, and joining me tonight is John Gatsis, my good friend. And we've been talking about the War for Independence, the American War for Independence, and the beginnings of that with the Battle of Lexington and Concord. And, you know, I wanted to make a point because I mentioned the Boston Massacre. An interesting thing, the soldiers, and this is kind of a parallel today, but the British soldiers were charged and put on trial for murder. Now, the colonial inhabitants, they were ready to hang those guys.
Right, their sentiments were highly anti-British.
They were highly anti-British. They were upset. They were angry. They were emotional. And they, as good as had those British soldiers convicted. Now, John Adams stepped forward to defend them in court. He took a lot of heat for that. They did not like him for that. They talked bad about him. They threatened him. He probably had death threats and who knows what else. I don't think anyone left a pig head on his door or anything like that. He risked a lot on that.
Yes.
He risked his legal practice, his reputation, and his standing in the community. But he defended them, and later after that, he was in great demand at the founding of this nation because the colonial residents looked at him and said, you know what, he stood for the very principles
that we're seeking to achieve.
Absolutely.
Right. That's right.
And that's the thing that we don't have today. We have people like Maxine Waters out there demanding
right.
a mob verdict.
A mob rule approach.
A mob, that's nothing less than a lynch mob.
That's correct. That's correct.
That is nothing less.
That's right.
And, you know...
Which parenthetically is the essence of democracy.
Yeah, well, it is. It absolutely is. That is the essence of democracy.
Right. And that statement may confuse some people who aren't familiar with the lexicon of these discussions, but actually democracy is the last step before tyranny.
It is.
And the founders were very much opposed to democracy. They learned from the lessons of the past, and they engineered and created a great constitutional republic, which really protects the rights of the individual against the mob. That's really, as much as anything else, that's part of the entire sort of concept underlying their creation.
Yeah, I completely agree. I completely agree. And you know, we have people both inside our government and outside our government who wish to eliminate the electoral college and give everyone a direct vote.
That's right.
So there's a simple majority, a majority of one.
Yeah, very dangerous.
Very dangerous. Very, very dangerous. In the first place, the president was never intended to be elected directly by the people.
That's correct.
Anyway.
That's correct.
And that's what people don't understand. And until the 17th Amendment, senators were not directly elected. They were elected by the state legislatures.
That's right, and that's why there were 2 senators per state, each representing the states as states, you know, appointed by the and then the House of Representatives was the democratic element of that structure. And ultimately, all the power in Washington derived from the people because they elected their state legislatures, they elected their House members, and all this power propagated somewhat tortuously through to the end result in Washington, but it was intended to be slow and intended to be full of checks and balances and to be difficult to make rapid change based on the whim of an emotional electorate.
Exactly, or crazy congresswomen and men who get elected by a complacent and largely politically ignorant electorate.
That's right.
You know, and we have people right now demanding that we have an Article 5 convention to propose amendments.
Right.
And,
very risky. And I think that's born out of desperation.
It is born out of desperation. And those people are patriots.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I'm not going to disparage them at all.
That's correct. I've spent some time with them.
What they believe is a fix for the problem.
They are like-minded in every way.
Absolutely, except on that
issue. Well, I think they missed the obvious question of, okay, because the politicians aren't obeying the words on the Constitution, you think some new words are going to precipitate some kind of allegiance or compliance, rather, with no. And in fact, you run the risk of having things made much worse.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, they ridicule anyone who objects to an Article 5 convention if they say, well, you can't limit the convention.
Right.
Which there's a lot of discussion on that, and you can go back over the last 75 years and read legal opinion on that. I've read quite a bit of it. It is rather dry.
Yeah, it's a complicated topic and difficult to explore all that in 5 minutes.
Oh, it is. There's no way you can just give a superficial overview of that.
Except for to express the headline view that you shouldn't tinker with the Constitution.
Exactly.
It would be a mistake.
Exactly.
It would be a very risky thing to do.
Absolutely
and
would.
I don't know why people are not thinking that through.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's kind of like the cop, like, stop, or I'll yell stop again. I mean, you're just going to modify these words, and these people are going to adhere to it.
Suddenly sit up and take notice.
Yeah,
not going to happen.
That's not right.
Not going to happen.
Right.
And you know, the thing about it, they're doing this under the assumption that the Constitution is somehow deficient or broken.
Right. Right.
Well, the Constitution is not broken. The Constitution is A-OK.
Yes.
It works flawlessly when it works. When people
when it's obeyed.
Work,
well, right, when it's obeyed.
And when the electorate forces the politicians to obey it. Now, the problem is the electorate is broken.
Right, and you're kind of dancing around it, but I was hoping you were going to get to something like that. And I think that's right. I think the electorate is broken, or you could even say the process by which the electorate comes to exist is broken.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought of a useful analogy. I mean, okay, I, like most people, having worked for a long time, have accumulated some stocks, not many, but I get these statements, periodically saying I should vote in these elections that these companies have. Well, I'll be honest, I never do cast votes in those elections, and for a very good reason. I don't know enough.
Right.
I'm not drilling down to the minutia of corporate governance and all the decisions that the board of directors made at companies like AT&T or even little dinky companies that I might invest in. Okay. Now, so for that reason, I don't cast a vote. But what I count on is that the laws of the land and the laws of corporate governance and the laws that govern what corporations can do protect me much the way the Constitution does.
Yeah.
I know that these corporations can't vote and say, well, we're gonna vote that John's shares are now worth a penny on the dollar.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
They can't do that. So I rest easy knowing that that framework is in place. I don't need to vote.
Right.
And if I don't know enough to cast an intelligent vote regarding what's going on at the AT&T boardroom, I shouldn't be voting. I probably shouldn't even be allowed to vote unless I can demonstrate some ability to cast an intelligent vote.
Yeah.
But I certainly shouldn't be allowed to vote if I don't own any shares.
I agree.
Okay. And so, so the analogy there is that if you're not a tax-paying citizen, I have a difficult time with people having the same vote that I do as a tax-paying citizen. So that's a lot of people are going to get the vapors over that, but tough.
I can't remember the last time I got an invitation from Microsoft or Apple or any of those companies to vote in their in-house elections. They just don't send them out to everyone.
Right.
They don't mail them out to the general public.
Because you don't own stock in those corps.
Exactly.
That's right.
And if you're not part of this nation, if you're not productive, if you're not contributing, and we're painting with a broad brush.
Well, but
we're not talking about handicapped,
no, of course not.
and retired or any of that stuff.
But even if you're not, you're still you get all the benefits of constitutional protection. That's more important. I am much more interested in my basic rights being adhered to by
absolutely,
than I am in some vote that I can cast that's ill-informed.
Absolutely.
And to extend the metaphor, if these corporations were to send out with their little proxy notices, little ad campaigns or little miniature, campaign ads, I wouldn't glean much information from 10 minutes of watching the now I know what to do.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think a person can cast a wise vote in a federal election based on 2 or 3 weeks of silly debates that are scripted and engineered and ridiculous commercial, right? And a couple of campaign ads that are very superficial and don't address all of that and just have some well-produced Hollywood production that's meant to evoke a certain response in people who don't know what, frankly, the issue actually concerns.
Right. That's right.
I've
talked to a lot of people, a lot of local people, property owners.
Yeah.
And they feel much the same way that I do, that if you don't own property, why do you get a vote on issues that drive up property tax?
Right.
How is that fair?
Well, fundamentally, isn't.
It isn't. That's correct. But we've been indoctrinated, or the electorate has been indoctrinated to believe that it is fair. And
right.
Everybody should pay their fair share, and we want these things, so all you property owners out there have to pay for these in the form of tax. Well, it's not fair.
Well, I think they've been indoctrinated to believe that somehow property owners are some privileged.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
Everybody has the opportunity to acquire property in this country. That's
right.
One of the beauties of the structure.
Exactly
we're not a landed gentry. We don't have nobility. Specifically, we don't acknowledge any nobility. That's in the Constitution, which, frankly, is why I have a hard time understanding a large segment of the country's fascination with the British Royals. But whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it just the electorate is very deficient today.
Yeah, it is.
Why else would there be a 47-year veteran of Congress who has never really done anything elected to president, along with a female vice president who has never really accomplished or contributed in any substantial way?
Right.
And people complain about career politicians, and yet people continue to elect them.
They do.
To me, that indicates
well, it does, and of course, the argument is that's why we need term limits. That's why we need.
Right.
But really, advocating for term limits is tantamount to really saying the electorate doesn't know what they're doing.
Exactly.
Okay.
That is exactly what that means.
Right. If it's so easy for all this big money to manipulate, members of the public into voting a certain way, and that's why we got to get the big money out of these elections.
Yeah.
Well, then these people have no business voting.
Exactly.
I don't watch any of those commercials. I just need a position paper and a voting history and
That's
a
it.
statement from. I don't even need to see them.
No.
And I know exactly how I'm going to
right.
vote, and no amount of campaign ads or any of that is going to sway my
Well, that's
opinion.
right.
on
I don't know of a single campaign ad in my entire life.
Doesn't make me
that ever changed my
absolutely.
vote. None.
That's correct.
And with that, we're going to take a little break. When we come back, we're going to talk about wokeness. I think everybody knows what that is,
My
or has
favorite.
heard of it at least. We're going to talk about that and some woke mathematics.
Can't wait.
So stay tuned. I'm Robert Cressionnie with John Gatsis, and we'll be back in just a minute.
Or maybe an hour.
It's our once-a-year incredible warehouse sale.
And you can't miss it.
From traditional to modern, we have the best home furnishings at 60 to 90% off. Thousands of lamps, decorative accessories, and chandeliers. An incredible selection of designer furniture, all conveniently located off I-95. Transform your home this year and save big.
You know where to find us. 218 North Church Street, downtown Rocky Mount.
All right, well, we're back. I'm Robert Cressionnie. This is John Gatsis joining me tonight, and we're having a good time. I hope you are.
Indeed.
But we want to talk a little bit about wokeness. Now, wokeness has crept into virtually everything. It is like a cancer that is consuming the host.
It's really overwhelming.
It is overwhelming, and there are such logical fallacies built into it, and just such lunacy, such dystopian, Orwellian, just mind-boggling.
Right down to the improper tense and use of the word woke.
Exactly. It doesn't take an English major to know that either.
Right.
All right, so we're going to talk about woke math.
Yeah.
Woke math. And, woke math is very interesting. Woke math, yeah. All of the formulas behind that, nope, forget those. Those are fading away.
Right. Those are products of an oppressive construct.
Of an oppressive construct. What we've got tweets like this, and I grayed out the name because I don't want anyone calling these people or attacking these people, unlike the left. But this young lady is responding to something, probably a tweet saying, 2 and 2 equals 4. And she says, nope, the idea of 2 plus 2 equaling 4 is cultural, and because of Western imperialism and colonization, we think of it as the only way of knowing. Now,
Yeah, let that sink in.
I tell you what, You know,
Well, there's so much to unpack there.
There really
mean,
is.
Yeah, I mean, I might even be at a loss for words, and that's probably anybody that knows me would say, what? Let's get a little more of this woke math thing going.
I'll tell you, it just, you know, it boggles the mind. 2 and 2 plus 4 equals 4.
Right.
Now, that's what I learned in school, and I want to try a little something here. Meg, if you'll hand me that cup off the table right there, I want to try something. And I just happen to have a stack of pennies here.
That should be interesting.
Yes, okay. And I've got 4 pennies here. You can't see them, but believe me, I've got 4 pennies here. Now, here's the experiment. All right. I'm going to take 2 pennies. This is 2 pennies. See, 2 pennies. And I'm going to drop them in that cup. All right. I'm going to take 2 more pennies, and I'm going to drop them in that cup. Now, John, count those for me and make sure there's 4 in there.
Well, there's an app on my phone, but you want me to count them?
Yeah, yeah. I think you
Let's see what we got here.
capable.
Okay. Uno, dos, tres, cuatro.
That can't be right. That can't be. Give me those back. We're going to try this again. All right. I'm going to put them in. I'm going to put 3 in at a time. All right, that's 3. And I'm going to put 1 more. Now, that will not equal 4.
1, 2, 3, 4. In any language, it's 4.
And that's the point we're trying to make.
Right.
Just having a little bit of fun doing it, but 2 plus 2 always equals 4. And what they're trying to say, and it gets much deeper than this, and don't think that this is just a bunch of, I don't know, I was going to say burned out hippies.
No, these are
People not burned out hippies.
professors
These are-
of mathematics at well-known universities proposing this nonsense.
Yeah. You know, the state of California. The state of California, Department of Education recently drafted the Equitable Math Framework.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Equitable Math Framework is based on centering ethnomathematics.
Right, which sounds like jargon, nonsense jargon.
Nonsense jargon. It's based on a culturally sustainable math space and helping students reclaim their mathematical ancestry.
Yeah, more nonsense.
More nonsense. Now, it doesn't end there. Let's talk about ethnomathematics for a minute.
Please.
Ethnomathematics. Very interesting. Let's see what ethnomathematics is about. This is a study of the relationship between mathematics and culture. Now, that, I can understand that.
On the surface, it sounds innocuous enough.
Or you're a historian, you want to know how cultures and math interact and
Right,
develop over
how they
time.
perpetuate each other and so forth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, where it starts to go off the beam is that it's often associated with cultures without written expression.
Okay.
Okay. It's also defined as the mathematics which is practiced among identifiable cultural groups. And it refers to ideas ranging from distinct numerical and mathematics systems to multicultural mathematics education. Now, I'm not real sure what that's all about.
Well, I'm squinting here because, I'm trying to, glean what possibly any of that could
exactly.
mean.
It's just all double talk.
It's all double talk.
It's all foolish double talk.
Well,
if you want to study culture and mathematics, that's fine. That's called anthropology, if I remember correctly.
Right.
But trying to somehow say that mathematical principles
Right, are fundamentally culturally distinct.
Yes.
Okay, and not subject to any universal, laws of nature. That's nonsense.
It is nonsense.
And frankly, what it sounds to me like, the people who are perpetuating this stuff are actually saying that the people that they represent aren't capable of pursuing higher mathematics.
Well, that's what it sounds to me.
Now,
that's exactly how it sounds to me.
And that's unfortunate because I always thought, and I've studied a fair amount of math, I always thought that the beauty of mathematics is that it really transcends language and culture.
Yeah.
I mean, I can promise you, for example, that the Chinese are not engaged in this kind of thinking.
No.
Okay, and they're using the exact same mathematical concepts that Leibniz and Newton came up with,
Yep.
the same calculus, the same, differential equations and everything else that people use to figure out and how to do certain complicated things.
Yeah.
And they are not obsessed with these nonsense ideas.
Right.
Okay. But the fact of the matter is, I can pick up a paper that was submitted by a Chinese engineer, and I can't read the Chinese part, but I can pretty much follow the math to the extent that my mathematical literacy is up to it.
Yep.
Okay, and that makes it a universal language that should serve to transcend cultural barriers. But unfortunately, we have a group of people right now in a movement in this country that's really looking to destroy everything.
That's
and
right.
and really, once these things are lost, they don't come back easily.
No, they don't. And we've seen that in ancient history.
Correct.
Where a civilization lost the ability to do some
Well, look at the Roman Empire.
technology that they had developed.
That's right.
And it's thousands of years before
it can be,
it's
that's right.
rediscovered.
That's right.
And the interesting thing about this is, even at the height of the Soviet Union, the Soviet engineers very, very often chose an engineering field, a mathematics field.
Right.
Because they could avoid the Orwellian doublespeak.
Right, the intrusion of the state into their thinking.
Exactly,
Yeah.
the communist state. So they chose a mathematics field because it was true,
Purely intellectual.
purely intellectual. What 2 + 2 is today
Right.
was 2 + 2 tomorrow,
That's
and
right.
the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And yet we have people now who are trying to say, oh no, just because you learned it that way
Right.
doesn't mean that's the way it is.
Well, when somebody uses a phrase like other ways of knowing,
Yeah.
okay, to me, that's a tacit admission that, well, you can't handle the accepted way of knowing, which produces
Right.
reproducible and accurate results.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
progress, frankly, progress.
Progress.
Okay.
Well, not to be outdone by California, Virginia has initiated the Virginia Mathematics Pathways Initiative.
Yeah, I saw that.
Now this is interesting, so let's take a look at what that entails. All right, the Virginia Mathematics Pathway Initiative, it calls for improving equity and math learning opportunities. Now,
Now, you might want to note that equity is a word that they're using now as a apart from equality.
Yeah.
Has a distinct and completely different definition now.
It does. It absolutely does.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure where opportunities are being denied. We have schools, we have programs. If people choose not to go into those fields or take those classes, then I'm sorry, we can't make everyone equal in those areas.
Well, they're hard.
They're hard.
And they take
are
discipline.
hard. They take discipline.
I mean-
I didn't go into astrophysics because I would have been the Chihuahua at the Greyhound track.
Right. That's right.
I took some math. I took calculus and some math, and it's hard.
It's hard.
I had to work at it.
Likewise.
Now, they want to empower students to be active in a quantitative world. And that's just double talk. Everything is quantitative in our world.
That's right.
From the amount of money you make per hour of your labor to what it costs you to buy groceries at the grocery store. Everything is quantitative. That's just double talk.
And really what they're really talking about is arithmetic.
Yeah.
They're not talking about
Right,
mathematics
exactly.
or higher mathematics or geometry or algebra
Exactly.
or any of the things that really are a testament to the human mind's ability to think.
Exactly. In fact, it eliminates Algebra 1, 2, and geometry
there you
from
go.
the curriculum. Now, these things are simply unbelievable that educators are engaging in this.
It is unbelievable.
It is unbelievable because I'm going to tell you what. If you design a bridge using this woke mathematics garbage, I'm not driving on it.
Right. Well, I used to always joke in the past because, medicine, for example, it's it's a blend of science and art, and it's a quantitative discipline, but it also has other factors that blur the purely scientific aspects of it. And so therefore lots of alternative medical things have crept into the lexicon of medicine. And some of them have value, but most of them are they don't stand up to the test. Right. They don't stand up to actual rigor. Okay. And I used to always joke, I noticed that nobody ever talks about alternative engineering. Nobody's saying, oh, we're going to use some crystal power to erect this, this bridge or to power this, because it so palpably and obviously doesn't work and is completely and total nonsense but yet, here we are. Okay, I mean, I'm in total disbelief. I never thought that we would reach the point where we're literally, and with a serious face, nationally having a discussion about whether mathematics or higher mathematics is somehow culturally driven and in some way oppressive.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't understand it myself.
That is the most destructive thing I have seen in my increasingly long life.
It is. It is. I tell you what, if you watch some of the movies based on history about the Apollo mission, those kind of things, those missions were accomplished by people sitting down, crunching numbers, and coming out with the right outcomes. Not based on culture, not based on their heritage, not based on who they were, where they came from, or some arbitrary, phony construct, but based on sound mathematics principles.
Right, and contrary to the assertions of these people, there is a correct and right answer.
Absolutely.
I mean,
that's the beauty of math.
I mean, you want to get into a whole metaphysical discussion about what is reality and all that, that's fine, but the rules of the universe that we live in and that we accept as being our reality, they have very fixed, immutable laws, and mathematics describes those and does it in a very elegant way and in a consistent way across all cultures.
Yep.
Okay, and so this is just, I'm amazed we have to have this discussion.
Me too.
I feel like I feel cheated out of time that I have to sit here and have this discussion about this nonsense.
Exactly. It is a waste of time, energy, and effort. And with that, we're going to take a little commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about some of the headlines today. So stay tuned. I'm Robert Cressionnie, my co-host John Gatsis. You're watching America in Danger. We'll be right back.
It's our once-a-year incredible warehouse sale.
And you can't miss it.
From traditional to modern, we have the best home furnishings at 60 to 90% off. Thousands of lamps, decorative accessories, and chandeliers. An incredible selection of designer furniture, all conveniently located off I-95. Transform your home this year and save big.
You know where to find us. 218 North Church Street, downtown Rocky Mount.
All right, we're back, and we've been talking about wokeness.
All right.
And I hate that term because it just doesn't sound right.
Yeah, it just rubs me raw.
Yeah, absolutely. Same here. But, with all this wokeness in mathematics, let's not forget that they have instituted wokeness in history as well. In fact, our own current president is promoting what's called the 1619 Project.
Right.
And that is simply a batch of made-up history, of fabricated history that has no basis in truth and is very ethnocentric Here we go. That's where ethnocentric comes in. And it's destroying the schools, it's destroying history, this is equivalent to what the Taliban do
Right.
in the Middle East with blowing up, 3,000-year-old monuments.
Yeah, or Stalin airbrushing people out of photos. And
exactly.
Yeah, absolutely,
Exactly.
just rewriting history.
And if people don't see the parallels there, I don't know how they can be made to see them.
Well, that's why some of us are a little on the pessimistic side about that sometimes.
I try not to be pessimistic because
I do too.
there are a lot of good people out there.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of good people out there. They just need a little direction, maybe a little nudge.
Yep.
And
I try to be a glass half full guy.
yeah, and they need to basically learn some of these things. All of these things, every one of these things we've talked about tonight is a repeating pattern.
Right.
It's simply a repeating pattern. Once you learn that pattern, you can spot it. It's like these illusions they used to put into Sunday papers, where after you stare at it for so long, you see a figure in it. Once you learn how to do that, boom, it pops up every time.
Right.
And that's how these issues are.
Well, it may just be one of the tragedies of the limited lifespan that humans have, that we can't exist long enough to recognize these patterns that have 100 and 200-year cycles.
Yeah.
And so people are constantly relearning things that they should have learned 1,000 years ago.
Well, that's absolutely true. And they say, we have to learn from history or we repeat it.
Right.
Well, you know what? When you have a portion of the country trying to destroy history.
Right, trying to rewrite it and recast it to fit a narrative that they are trying to impose on people. I mean, the 1619 Project, it's ridiculous on its face, too. Even the New York Times, which is, they were really the promulgating organ, right? I think it was one of, even their fact checkers, ultimately said, this is all nonsense.
Yeah.
There's nothing to, this is, and yet that hasn't dissuaded the textbook creators from incorporating this completely, frankly, dangerous bomb-throwing nonsense, into the discourse of historical learning at the primary school level. I mean, it's just, again, it's another one of these things that indicates to me that we're really, I mean, this may sound strong, we're in the middle of a full-blown, Marxist, culturally Marxist revolution.
Yeah, we are.
And I don't think, I think it takes being in one to realize that in other instances of history, people didn't know that's what was happening. We look at that history and go, how did they not know?
Exactly.
And yet they didn't, because these things happen over a relatively long period of time, and it's tough to spot for most people.
Take Venezuela.
Right.
Once a very prosperous nation.
Absolutely.
And now it has descended into people eating out of dumpsters.
Right.
Right.
Massive shortages. Right. A textbook case of what happens when you pursue these statist, top-down Marxist policies.
Exactly. And that's what we've got going on in this country. That's the whole fundamental change that Barack Obama talked about. That's the change America that Chuck Schumer shouted rather strangely. I don't know if you happen to catch that. He said, "Win Georgia and change America."
Yeah, I did see that actually.
Yeah. And this is the fundamental change that these newcomers in Congress are talking about. That's what they want to change. They want to turn this into a socialist nation. When we have AOC talking about rounding up Trump supporters and sending them to re-education camps.
Right.
I remember the last time that happened over in Cambodia.
Yeah.
The outcome of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's amazing. These people always have to use coercion to get their way. They never ever can make their they can't make their case in any kind of an open, free form. They have to put a gun to your head and say you will think this way and you will follow these edicts, or there are going to be consequences. Now, what they're doing now is they're less heavy-handed than these movements have been in the past. They're using first of all, they privatize the public square through Facebook and through these social media, and then they're putting immense pressure on people vis-a-vis their jobs, making them lose it. And so people aren't willing to speak out because they don't want to lose their comfortable deal. And I get it. I mean, to be honest with you, if I had one of those big $500,000 a year jobs somewhere and I was told you're going to lose it unless you spout this nonsense, I might start spouting the nonsense. I don't know. You don't know until you're tested that way. But
well, that's the thing. If you're in corporate America, you know that you can't talk about these topics around the water cooler or at break time or in the cafeteria, because You'll get called on the carpet
That's
for
right.
it, possibly fired.
Right, and that's exactly how it was in the Soviet Union. That's exactly how it is in China. That's exactly how it is in any of these totalitarian societies that you know, we hold up as models for what not to become.
That's right. That's right. Well, shifting gears here, let's talk about Arizona and Maricopa County. There has been an audit ordered of 2 million ballots and a forensic examination of the voting machines.
Right.
Now, what's the first thing the Democrats did?
They sued.
They sued and wanted an injunction against this audit. This begs the question, why?
But also typical of Democrats, they couldn't pony up the money that they needed to pay to do, they wouldn't pay their bill.
They wouldn't pay the bill.
Right,
They
that's
wanted someone
right.
else to pay it for them. Now,
That's
the
right.
taxpayers had been on the hook for that.
That's correct. That's correct.
Rolled that money out.
So the suit was halted and then it was resumed.
Yeah.
And I don't know where it stands now.
I'm not sure either. The last I saw was that they wouldn't pay the money, so it was going to resume, but who knows?
Now, I did catch this tidbit. The Democrats had 75 lawyers to oppose that recount. Well, that's all kind of a where there's smoke, there's fire kind of evidence to me. I mean, I don't know, but that just seems to me like, really? I mean, if you're that confident in your result and you're so sure that the election was on the up and up, you need 75 lawyers to go down there and you know, use lawfare to try and derail a simple recount or a simple audit of these highly suspect voting machines and procedures?
Yeah.
Eh.
And you know, what really gets me is, you know, we need to have elections with integrity. We need to feel like that when I go down and cast my ballot, that it is going to be added in,
right,
and not manipulated, not stolen, not overridden,
not nullified by some out of thin air vote that gets created by some other mechanism.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We need to know that. So to me, at the very first inkling of suspicion that there were problems with voting machines, why were voting machines not seized? That's my question. Why did they not seize them and say, we're going to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that these voting machines are not rigged, that they're not manipulated, that the votes are not changed? Why was there such opposition to doing that? And why did our federal government sit on its hands?
Is that a rhetorical question? I mean, because I have an answer. I mean, I think it was I think there was a tacit agreement among the establishment. That's the third time I've used that word. I recognize that. To you know, to get that guy out. Okay, and they would deal with things later, you know. But right now, we got to get rid of that guy that's up there right now because he's not one of us. He's not doing what we want.
I have to agree, and I wish we had more time, but we are out of time. We are over time. Tune in next week for more America in Danger. Thanks for watching.